Hey business warriors, Business Shifu here, and in this video we are going to be talking about, is Boeing stock a buy? Okay, now just today Boeing announced that they will be releasing a software fix for the issue that most likely caused the two crashes, one last year and one just a few days ago, sooner than expected, okay, which has caused the stock to jump quite rapidly. We'll put the graph on screen so you can see it there, around 375 level as of the recording of this video. And so obviously we'll talk about my opinions on this stock a little bit later in the video. First, we'll just sort of recap on the whole situation. So obviously there have been two crashes, one last year, one just a few days ago. The first one was Lion Air, which is an Indonesian airline. The second one was Ethiopian Airlines in Ethiopia. Very tragically, everyone on these two planes, was killed in the crashes. So our hearts go out to, those victims and their families. But now let's talk about sort of the situation from a business standpoint, all right? So the 737 MAX 8, it has been grounded all across the world, okay? First in China, then Britain, then the EU, and then finally in the United States a few days later. The US was the last to ground the planes. Now there are 350 of these planes in service, or currently grounded. There are also 4,600 of them on order from Boeing, which represents $550 billion in future revenue, and that is 1/3 of Boeing's entire revenue across its entire business model. So you'd just understand like the scale of this. It is their most successful product, actually the most successful plane in history, I believe. And it's a huge part, a huge chunk of their revenue. Now, it could cost Boeing anywhere between $1 and $5 billion to pay airlines for the grounding of these planes, okay? Because many airlines, the contract they sign when they buy the planes is that if the planes are grounded by law, by an aviation authority for a fault that is believed to be the plane maker's fault, often the plane maker has to actually pay for that grounding and pay for them the costs associated with it. So to lease new planes, it may cost around $1 million per plane leased for 3-month period, if it's working off of a 3-month period assumption. And airlines across the world, I mean, that's $350 million if it was $1 million per plane to lease. And so analysts have been, and that's just the leasing cost, but then also the cost of actually storing the planes that are grounded. And there's a lot of other costs associated with it, legal costs, and then don't forget the victims of the tragedy who may decide to sue Boeing. So analysts believe that this could cost Boeing between $1 billion and $5 billion to sort out this tragedy and everything associated with it, upgrades to the planes, costs of the grounding of the planes, etc. Then another cost to Boeing that should be thought about is that, with 4,600 planes on order, will other airlines start to cancel their orders? Well, according to a few articles I've read, it seems that probably will be unlikely. And the reason is that the closest competitor to this exact aircraft, 737 MAX 8, would be the A320neo from Airbus. Now, there is already a backlog of orders of several years for that plane. So airlines that have already ordered with Boeing, they would have already put around 20% down, okay? They could get out of these contracts maybe, but then what are they going to do after that? Are they going to go order the A320neo, which will push their acquisition of a new aircraft back by several years? Probably a lot of airlines are just going to hold out and hope that they do release a software fix for this issue, rather than going and buying Airbus planes instead. So from that point of view, it actually looks quite good for Boeing. Probably not too many orders will be cancelled, at least at the moment. Then another thing you can think about as well is that, has this happened to Boeing before, and how did the stock react last time? Well, previously, a similar issue happened with the 787. There were batteries on that plane that caught fire back in 2013, and the 787s were grounded. However, there was no loss of life at that time. So it's not totally comparable, but at that time, Boeing did obviously have to deal with a problem. They took a hit and they recovered and continued to advance until today. The company totally recovered from it. So it was dealt with, and potentially the same thing could happen this time. They just deal with it and the company moves on and they advance and nothing else happens. That's the best case scenario. We get something similar happen with the 787. Okay, so that's kind of the situation with Boeing and the whole thing that's going on. Now we'll ask the question, should you buy the dip? Well, Robinhood, the popular stock trading app, say that a lot of their users have been buying the dip. The number of accounts that hold Boeing stock have increased by 68%. So basically, you can see that headline there, millennials are buying the dip. It's a lot of millennials that use Robinhood. So a lot of retail investors have obviously been interested in buying this dip. I myself have bought it. I already held Boeing. I'll tell you when I bought originally. So I first bought Boeing on February 11th, 2019, and I bought at $4.05 per share. The stock price then continued to go up. I was up quite a lot on my investment. But then obviously this second crash happened, which tanked the stock by a huge amount. So I bought in on the dip at, on March 12th, 2019 at $3.80. And I lowered my cost basis to $398 per share. I actually bought just before the FAA grounded the planes, okay, the FAA originally weren't going to do it, but then Trump stepped in and grounded the whole fleet in the US. So I bought before that, and that tanked the stock even more down to the 370s. So actually, it would have been better if I'd waited just a little bit longer, but hey, it's very hard to time the bottom exactly. So, whatever, you can't really feel regret about these things. And so, yeah, the best time to buy the dip would have been yesterday or this morning. And then obviously there's been some positive news about Boeing, since today, okay, with releasing this software fix earlier than expected. Now, Boeing is, in my opinion, a reasonably solid company in terms of its profits, its kind of financial situation, also its position within the US economy. It's, the United States kind of premier plane maker, the only real large plane maker in the world besides Airbus, okay? And also it plays a huge part in the defense industry here in the US as well. Not as big as its commercial operations, but still a very big part of the business. The current defense secretary, Patrick Shanahan, has been dubbed Mr. Boeing, okay? He was with Boeing for 20 years and only left in 2017, and now he's the Secretary of Defense. So you can kind of presume that Boeing will play quite a big role in defense procurement in the years to come, especially with this Space Force that they're creating, which supposedly will cost between $5 and $13 billion, depending on who you listen to. Combine that with a $54 billion increase in the US military budget. So it's no stretch of the imagination that their military sales are going to be strong. The problem is in the civilian aviation field, if another crash were to happen, God forbid, first of all, that would be a huge tragedy, loss of life. But if another crash were to happen, I think that would raise serious questions about this plane, especially if it was to happen after the new software update has been implemented, okay? Now, I'm not going to go into all the details about this system, but basically it's an unusual system that is different to what's been on other planes before. It's designed to stop the plane stalling. It pulls the nose down. And the problem that's happened with some of these flights, especially the first one, the Lion Air one, was that the pilots were fighting this system and trying to pull the nose up manually. They didn't manage to switch this system off. So there have been some issues with this system, whether it's down to training, whether it's down to the ground crews in these countries doing poor maintenance, not maintaining the sensors properly, etc. That could be an issue. It is kind of third world countries that these crashes have happened in. Or it could be sort of, I'm personally believing that it might be a 50% sort of 50-50. The plane has this unusual system that's kind of new. The places where it's happened, the pilots are not, English isn't their first language. They've had a hard job adapting to this new system. That could possibly be it, but I'm not an aviation expert, so don't take that as 100% right. So that would be one serious downside risk if another crash was to happen. Then you also have to think about the fact that Boeing has been cutting costs for the last certainly couple of years, okay? And they've also been boosting their stock price with share buybacks. So if they have to fork out a lot of money for these disasters and the grounding of the planes, etc., share buybacks may slow down, cost cutting, they might have to backtrack on some cost cutting, etc. So that also might be other reasons to decrease the earnings, on the stock, okay, earnings per share, etc. So there is quite a lot of downside risk on this stock, okay. My personal opinion, what I'm going to do, I am going to continue buying the dips, lowering my cost basis on this, but I'm diversified, okay? Diversification is the key. I'm not going to risk a large amount of my portfolio in this because I think that there is quite a lot of downside risk, and the upside might not be as much as some people may think it is. Although I do think that if they can come out of this well, like they did with the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, their stock will continue to rise, at a moderate rate. But that's my opinion on it. Please leave your comments below. What do you guys think about Boeing stock? Have any of you bought in? Did any of you buy the dip? I'd love to hear your comments. Please subscribe for more investing and business videos every week. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.